Okay, last part. I got interrupted, so here's a part 2, finish up. Okay, powers of I. So we were just talking about how the square root of -1, the square root, it's a new concept, but square root of -1 is not a real number. It's imaginary unit, so they call it I. So yeah, that's like I, honestly it's like I to the first power. That's just I, okay? So then we think about, what about I squared? We're going to do different powers. They might ask you, what's I squared? What's I to the third power? I to the fourth power? Etc. So I squared, okay, we have to think about that. I squared, well, the I concept was just square root of -1. So if you take that and square it, what happens? If you square that, the square root goes away. Some of you might know that when you square a square root, it like cancels each other, so it's just -1. So I squared is -1. Okay, I to the third power. Okay, we got to break it. It's like breaking it apart. I to the third is like I squared, and there's another I. There's 3 letter I's there. Oops, I to the first. See, it's 3 letter I's, so I squared times one more I. Well, we just talked about I squared is -1. We just found that. And the I to the first is just I. So I to the third power is -I. This is a weird concept. Okay, so what we got so far is I to the first is I. I squared is -1. I to the third is -I. Now we can do, how about I to the fourth power? The fourth power, I can break that down. That'd be like 2 I's and 2 more. 2 and 2. 2 and 2 make 4. It's just different, kind of interesting topic. So I squared, we can like kind of go up and use what we already learned. I squared is -1. And I squared again, -1. So you have -1 times -1. Negative times negative, that'd be positive. So I to the fourth power is +1. So we end up kind of like with a chart here. We could keep going. It's kind of interesting. It actually keeps like repeating. It's like a repeating pattern. You might know sometimes when you take things to 0 power, that's a thing you learned back in Algebra 1. Anything to the 0 power actually equals 1. So this actually keeps going. I could do more I to the fifth and do that. I to the fifth, here I can do it on the side quick. I to the fifth would be like I squared, another I squared, because it has to add up to 5, 2 and 2, and maybe one more I. Well, I squared was -1, I squared is -1, and then I, this is just like I to the first, which you can just say is still I. Oh, so that'd be negative times negative is positive, so it'd be +I. See, that goes back to I again, I. All right, so there's a chart here, and it goes 1, I, -1, -I, 1, I. If I kept going, it would go -1, then -I. The pattern repeats. Okay, so if I kept going, it just repeats these first 4 over and over again. It goes 1, I, -1, -I, 1, I, and then I to the 6th is -1, and then I to the 7th is -I. It just repeats, and you could keep going forever. It's a repeating pattern. So there are 4 answers to that, just 4 different answers. It's a repeating pattern. So the last thing they ask you is, well, what if I asked you to find I to the 62nd power? Okay, you can count, but I don't want to count forever. That's pretty high. I don't want to count up to, okay, so you could figure out like I to the 62nd power. There's a trick to it. since there's 4 answers, you can take the number 62, you can take this number and divide it by 4. And find the remainder. So we'll show you. We're going to take 62, we're going to divide it by 4, like old school by hand, because we need the remainder, like you did in elementary school. 4 goes into 6 once, 1 times 4 is 4, subtract, that'd be 2, bring down the next 2. 4 goes into 22 5 times, 5 times 4 is 20, subtract, squeeze it down at the bottom of my paper. If I subtract 22 minus 20, I get a remainder of 2. So I get remainder of 2. So that means it's like I squared. If it's a remainder of 2, it means it's going to be like the I squared answer. So my I squared answer is -1. So my answer is -1. So I to the 62 power equals -1. So the rule is, since it's just 4 answers that repeated over and over and over, the rule is to divide by 4. It's just because there's 4 answers. 4 answers, so divide by 4. Then find that remainder. That remainder is like the power of the answer. So I got a 2 remainder, so it was I squared, it's -1 for the answer. If your remainder is 3, then it's this answer. If remainder is 0, then it's this answer. So it's kind of interesting. You can do any power you want. You could do it. You could figure out any power. You can do any one. Okay, so that was the last part. So now the assignment is on the ALEKS program. Remember, you go to Clever, McGraw-Hill, go to ALEKS. You should find a complex numbers assignment.